Learn English through a true and powerful story. A story that touched millions of hearts around the world. Today, you will hear about Hachiko, a simple dog from the north of Japan. A dog who showed the world the meaning of loyalty, patience, and love. This is not a story of action or adventure. It is a story of a quiet heart. A dog who waited every single day for the person he loved most. In this audiobook, you will follow Hachiko from his first days as a small puppy to his life in the busy streets of Tokyo, to the long years he spent sitting in front of Shibuya Station, waiting, hoping, believing. As you listen, focus on the rhythm of the sentences, the emotion in the moments, and the simple English that helps you learn step by step. Let this story teach you vocabulary, teach you structure, and teach you something deeper about loyalty and love. Now, take a deep breath, relax your mind, and step into the world of Hachiko. The story begins in a quiet, snowy town with a small puppy who would one day become Japan's most faithful dog. Chapter 1. A Puppy from Akita. The night was cold, very cold. Snow covered the small houses in the north of Japan. This place was called Akita. It was a quiet town, a white town, a place where winter stayed for a long time. Inside a wooden shed behind a farmer's home, something special was happening. A mother dog lay on clean straw. Her body was warm. Her breath was slow, and next to her, 8 small puppies slept close to her chest. One of these puppies was Hachiko. At first, he could not see. He could not walk. He only felt warmth, milk, and the soft body of his mother. But even as a tiny puppy, Hachiko had a strong heart. He pushed his small nose closer to his mother. He always tried to move first. He was curious, brave, and full of quiet energy. Every morning, the farmer came to check on the puppies. He opened the shed door slowly because he did not want to scare them. Cold air entered the room, but the puppies stayed warm next to their mother. The farmer smiled. "These puppies are strong," he said gently. He touched their soft fur. He counted them again. 1, 2, 3, 8. All safe. The children of the farmer loved this shed. They came every day after school. They sat on the floor and watched the puppies sleep. Sometimes they laughed when a puppy tried to stand and fell. Sometimes a puppy made a small sound like a tiny bark and the children clapped their hands. Hachiko was different from the others. When the shed door opened, he lifted his head first. When the children came, he walked toward their voices. His legs were small and weak, but he tried again and again. He did not give up. He wanted to see the world outside the warm shed. 2 weeks passed. The puppies opened their eyes. They saw light for the first time. They saw their mother, the straw, the wooden walls, and they saw the smiling faces of the children. Hachiko blinked many times. The world looked big, bright, and a little scary. But he did not hide. He took a few steps, then a few more. He fell, then stood up again. Step by step, he learned. Soon, the puppies began to play. They chewed on the straw. They pulled each other's ears. They rolled on the floor and made happy noises. The shed was full of life. One day, a cold wind opened the shed door wider than usual. Snow blew inside. 3 puppies ran after the falling snowflakes. They did not know the danger. The snow was deep. The air was freezing. The mother dog barked loudly. She felt something was wrong. The children heard her and ran outside. They saw the 3 puppies stuck in the snow, unable to move. "Quick!" the farmer shouted. "Bring them inside!" The children carried the cold puppies back into the warm house. 2 of them cried softly. But one puppy looked around with bright eyes, curious even in the cold. It was Hachiko. The farmer touched him gently. "This one is brave," he said softly. "He does not cry. He watches everything." Winter continued, and the puppies grew bigger. Their legs became stronger. Their fur became thicker. They no longer stayed in the shed all the time. They walked around the yard. They followed the children. They barked at birds and tried to catch falling leaves. But a decision was coming. The puppies were almost old enough to leave their mother. They needed new homes, new families. One morning, the farmer sat with his wife at the wooden table. He held a letter in his hand. "It is from Professor Ueno in Tokyo," he said. "He wants an Akita puppy, a strong one, a brave one." The farmer's wife looked toward the yard. "Hachiko," she whispered. "He is the one." The farmer nodded slowly. "Yes, the professor will love him, and Hachiko will have a good life." Outside, Hachiko ran in the snow. He did not know that his life was about to change. He did not know that he would soon travel far from Akita, to a big city, to a new home, to the person who would love him forever. And so, the journey of the loyal dog began. Chapter 2. A New Home in Tokyo. The morning was calm in Akita. A soft wind moved across the snow. The farmer walked into the yard with a small wooden box in his hands. Inside the box was Hachiko. He was bigger now, stronger, but still a young puppy with soft eyes and warm fur. The farmer touched Hachiko's head. "It's time," he whispered. "You are going to Tokyo today. You will have a good master, a kind man." Hachiko did not understand the words, but he felt the change. He felt the air, the movement, the sound of the train in the distance. His little heart beat fast. The farmer's wife stood beside her husband. She looked at the puppy carefully. "He was the bravest," she said softly. "He will be happy with the professor." The children came running from the house. They hugged the farmer's legs. "Can we say goodbye to Hachiko?" they asked. The farmer smiled a sad smile. "Yes, come." The children opened the box a little. Hachiko looked at them. He wagged his tail once, then again. The children touched his warm fur. They loved him. But they knew he must go. The farmer carried the box slowly through the snowy yard. The path was long, white, and quiet. The train station was not far, but the morning felt heavy. It was hard to say goodbye to a friend. At the station, steam rose from the waiting train. The driver stood near the door. He saw the box and the small puppy inside. "Is this the dog for Professor Ueno?" he asked. "Yes," the farmer replied. "He is brave and strong. Please take care of him on the journey." The driver nodded. "I will." He placed the box next to his seat. When the train started moving, the ground shook gently. Hachiko cried a little. The driver opened the box and touched the puppy's head. "It's okay, little one," he said kindly. "You are going to a new home." Hachiko looked up with wide eyes. He did not cry again. He stayed quiet, listening to the sound of the train. The wheels made a soft rhythm, clack, clack, clack. The sound was new. The movement was new. But Hachiko felt safe. Hours passed. The snow disappeared outside the window. The buildings grew taller. The streets grew wider. And soon, the train reached Shibuya Station in Tokyo. The station was busy. People walked fast. Voices mixed together. Bicycles rang their bells. It was nothing like Akita, but Hachiko only saw one thing. A man in a dark coat stood waiting near the train door. His eyes were warm. His smile was gentle. This man was Professor Hidesaburo Ueno. When the driver handed him the box, the professor bowed politely. "Thank you," he said. He opened the box and looked at the puppy inside. "Oh," he whispered, "you are beautiful." Hachiko wagged his tail slowly. He felt something calm, something trusting. He felt safe again. The professor lifted the puppy into his arms. Hachiko pressed his head against the man's chest. He could feel the steady heartbeat. It was warm, familiar, like the heartbeat of his mother. The professor carried Hachiko through the busy station. People looked and smiled. "What a cute Akita puppy," someone said. "Where did he come from?" another asked. The professor did not hear them clearly. He was focused on the small life in his arms. "This is my companion," he whispered to Hachiko. "My friend." When they reached the street, the professor walked to a quiet house near the university. It had a small yard with trees, a gate, and a wooden shed. The professor opened the gate. "Welcome home," he said softly. Hachiko stepped inside the yard. New smells, new light, new sounds. He touched the ground with careful steps. He looked around slowly. The professor watched him with a warm smile. He placed a bowl of water beside the shed. Then he offered a small plate of rice with fish. Hachiko sniffed the food, then started to eat. He felt warm again. He felt safe again. He felt something new, something special. This place was different from Akita. It was louder, bigger, faster. But inside this yard, next to this kind man, Hachiko felt at home. Night came. The professor put a soft blanket inside the wooden shed. He touched the puppy gently. "Sleep well, Hachiko," he whispered. "I am here." The puppy closed his eyes slowly. The day was long. The world was new. But his heart was calm. He had found his new home. Chapter 3. Morning Walks to Shibuya. The sun rose slowly over Tokyo. Soft light entered the small yard of the professor's house. Birds began to sing, one by one. And in the wooden shed, Hachiko opened his eyes. He stretched his legs. He shook his fur. A new day began. The professor stepped into the yard. He wore a dark coat and carried his small bag for work. When Hachiko saw him, he wagged his tail again and again. "Good morning, Hachiko," the professor said gently. "Are you ready for our walk?" Hachiko barked once. A happy, quiet bark. Every morning, the professor played with Hachiko for a few minutes. He touched his head, fed him his breakfast, checked if he was warm. Then, when it was time to leave, he walked toward the gate. At first, Hachiko stayed inside the yard. He watched the professor. He listened to the gate open and close. But one morning, something changed. The professor walked out to the street. He took a few steps. Then he heard a sound behind him. Soft paws on the ground. He turned around. There was Hachiko. "Hachiko," the professor said with surprise. "You jumped over the gate?" The puppy sat down and looked up at him. His tail moved slowly, like he was asking a simple question. "Can I come with you?" The professor smiled. "Only to the station," he said softly. "But after that, you must go home." And so, they walked together. The little street was quiet in the early morning. Shops were still closed. Old houses stood side by side. A bicycle passed softly. Hachiko walked close to the professor's leg. He looked left, right. Everything was new. Everything was interesting. They reached Shibuya Station in a few minutes. People began to arrive. Men in coats, women carrying baskets, students with school bags. The professor stopped near the station door. He bent down and touched Hachiko's head. "Stay here," he said kindly. "I will come back later." Hachiko wagged his tail. He watched the professor walk through the door and disappear inside the station. For a moment, Hachiko felt confused. He looked around. There were so many people, so many sounds. But he remembered the professor's voice. He remembered the simple word, "stay." So he sat near the wall, quiet, calm, waiting. People walked past him. Some smiled. Some looked surprised. "A puppy? Here so early? What a cute Akita dog." But Hachiko stayed in his place. After some time, he stood up. He walked slowly back to the small street. He followed the same path he took with the professor. He reached the gate. He jumped inside the yard. The professor's wife, Mrs. Ueno, saw him. "Hachiko, where were you?" she asked. But the puppy just wagged his tail. He lay on the warm ground and closed his eyes. This became the new routine. Every morning, Hachiko watched the professor leave. He jumped over the gate. He followed him to the station. He stayed there until the professor disappeared inside. Then he returned home. The professor tried to stop him. "Hachiko, stay! Hachiko, don't jump over the gate!" But Hachiko always found a way. When the professor walked, Hachiko followed. When the professor stopped, Hachiko sat beside him. The two looked like best friends, walking side by side. As days passed, Hachiko grew bigger. His legs became strong. His fur became thick and shiny. His bark became deeper. The professor was proud of him. "You are becoming a fine Akita," he said. "A loyal dog." At Shibuya Station, people began to recognize him. The ticket men smiled when they saw him. "Here comes the professor's dog again," they said. "What a loyal little friend." Sometimes children touched Hachiko's fur. Sometimes old men gave him a small piece of bread. Everyone liked him. But Hachiko did not come for food. He did not come for attention. He came for one reason: to be with his master. In the evening, something beautiful happened. The professor left the station at almost the same time every day. When the door opened, Hachiko stood up. His tail wagged fast. His eyes shone with happiness. He walked with the professor all the way home, morning and evening, day after day. This was their life. A simple life, a peaceful life, a life full of trust. And in those early days, under the bright Tokyo sky, Hachiko did not know that these small walks would one day make him famous across the world. He only knew one thing: he loved his master, and he wanted to walk with him every morning. Chapter 4. The Daily Routine. Morning came again in Tokyo. Soft light touched the windows of the professor's house. The yard was still quiet, calm, peaceful. Inside the wooden shed, Hachiko opened his eyes slowly. He lifted his head. He listened to the sounds around him. Birds sang. The wind moved the small leaves, and inside the house he heard footsteps. It was the professor. The door opened, and Professor Ueno stepped outside with a warm smile. "Good morning, Hachiko," he said softly. Hachiko's tail moved fast. He walked to the professor. He rubbed his head gently against the man's leg. Every morning began like this: a greeting, a touch, a simple moment of love. The professor placed a bowl of food near the shed: rice, fish, warm water. Hachiko ate happily. Then he shook his fur. He followed the professor to the gate. The professor looked at him. "You know the rule," he said kindly. "You can walk with me, but only to the station." Hachiko barked softly. He understood, so they walked together. The street was calm in the early morning. The air was cool. Shops were still closed. A few people walked slowly to work. Hachiko stayed close to the professor's side. He did not run. He did not pull. He walked like a polite, careful dog. When they reached Shibuya Station, the professor stopped. He bent down and touched Hachiko's head. "I will return this evening," he whispered. "Wait for me at home." But Hachiko had a new habit now. He did not return home right away. He liked to sit near the station door. He liked to watch the people. He liked to wait for a moment. Just a moment. After the professor went inside. People noticed him more and more. "That dog comes every morning," a shop owner said. "Yes," answered another man. "He belongs to the professor from the university." Some smiled at him. Some touched his head gently. Some children pointed at him with happy faces. But Hachiko did not move. He sat in the same place, the same corner, the same spot every day. After a short time, he stood up. He walked back along the narrow street. He jumped over the gate. He returned to the yard. Mrs. Ueno sometimes saw him and laughed. "You went to the station again, didn't you?" she said. "You are such a loyal dog." In the afternoon, Hachiko rested under the warm sun. He listened to sounds from the house. He watched the birds on the tree. Sometimes he chased a small leaf that moved with the wind. Sometimes he slept deeply. But in the evening, something special happened every day. At the same time, almost like a clock. Hachiko stood up. He looked at the gate. He walked slowly toward it. Then he jumped over it with one clean movement. He walked down the same street. He reached the same station. He sat in the same place. People noticed this too. "Look," a woman said. "It's the professor's dog. He comes at the same time every day." Hachiko sat quietly. He looked at the station door. He watched every person who came out. One man, two women, a student, a worker. Then the door opened again, and Hachiko stood up fast. The professor stepped outside. His face brightened when he saw Hachiko. "Ah, you came again," he said gently. "You waited for me." Hachiko wagged his tail hard. His whole body moved with joy. He walked beside the professor all the way home. This happened again, and again, and again. The routine became perfect. Morning walk, evening welcome every day, every week, every month. People began to expect him. "He will come soon," they said. "The loyal dog always comes." And they were right. Hachiko did not care about food, or toys, or games. He cared about one thing: being with his master. This simple routine, this peaceful rhythm, became the heart of Hachiko's life. He did not know the future. He did not know what was coming. He only knew this moment, this day, this walk. And in these quiet walks, the bond between a man and his dog became stronger than anyone could imagine. Chapter 5. The Day. Everything changed. The morning began like any other morning. The sun was soft. The air was cool. Tokyo was waking up slowly. Inside the wooden shed, Hachiko opened his eyes. He stood up, stretched his legs, and stepped into the yard. He waited near the door, just like he did every day. The door opened. Professor Ueno walked out with his calm smile. "Good morning, Hachiko," he said softly. Hachiko wagged his tail. He followed the professor around the yard. He watched him put on his shoes, fix his coat, prepare for the day. The professor placed a bowl on the ground. Rice, warm fish, clean water. Hachiko ate happily. After breakfast, the professor touched the puppy's head. "Ready for our walk?" he asked. Hachiko barked once. A soft, happy sound. They walked together through the quiet street. They passed the same houses, the same shops, the same corners. Hachiko stayed close to the professor, step after step. At Shibuya Station, the professor stopped. He bent down. "I will come home this evening," he said gently. "Wait for me, my friend." Hachiko looked at him with warm, trusting eyes. He watched the professor walk into the station and disappear behind the door. Hachiko sat down. He stayed calm. He stayed quiet. He waited for a moment, then began the walk back home. Everything felt normal. Everything felt the same. But that day, Something different was happening far away at the university. In the yard, Hachiko rested under the sunlight. He listened to the birds. He watched people pass by the gate. He waited for lunchtime. He waited for afternoon. But sometimes, he lifted his head. He felt something strange. He did not know what it was. He only felt it in his heart. Inside the house, Mrs. Ueno prepared tea. She looked out the window and saw Hachiko sitting near the door. "He is quiet today," she whispered. Hachiko stood up. He walked in circles. He barked once, then looked at the gate. Mrs. Ueno came outside. "There is no one there," she said softly. "Why are you barking, Hachiko?" The puppy sat again. He looked at the gate. He listened. Something was wrong, but he could not understand what it was. Evening came. The sun began to go down. Shadows grew longer on the street. Hachiko stood up slowly. He walked toward the gate and jumped over it. He went to Shibuya Station. He reached his usual place. He sat down. People walked past him. He watched every face. He looked for one man, only one. The station door opened. Many people came out, men, women, students, but not the professor. Hachiko did not move. He kept his eyes on the door. Another train arrived. More people came out. Still, the professor did not appear. A worker at the station looked at Hachiko and sighed. "He is waiting again," he said softly. "He thinks the professor will come." Hours passed. The sky turned dark. Lights shone through the station windows. Hachiko stayed in the same place. His body felt cold, but his heart stayed warm, because he believed his master would return. Midnight came. The last trains arrived. People went home. The streets became empty. Hachiko finally stood up. Slowly, quietly. He walked back to the small street. He reached the house. He stood at the door and barked once. Mrs. Ueno came out. She looked at the dog, then looked down at the ground. Her eyes filled with tears. She touched Hachiko's head gently. "Your master is not coming home," she whispered. "Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever." Hachiko kept looking at the gate. He did not understand the words. He only felt the sadness in her voice. Mrs. Ueno stepped back inside the house. She left the door open for him. "You can sleep inside," she said quietly. But Hachiko did not move. He stayed in the yard. He stayed near the gate. He stayed where he always waited for the professor. The night was cold. The world was quiet. And Hachiko waited for the man who would never return. Chapter 6. Waiting Alone. Morning came again in Tokyo. The sky was pale and gray. The air felt cold. Silence covered the yard. Hachiko opened his eyes slowly. He looked around the shed. He waited for a sound, a step, a warm voice. But the professor did not come. Hachiko walked to the door of the house. He looked at it. Then he looked at the gate. He did not understand what happened the day before. He only knew one thing. Every morning his master walked into the yard. Every morning his master touched his head. So Hachiko waited. Mrs. Ueno opened the door quietly. She looked tired. Her eyes were red. "Good morning, Hachiko," she whispered. Hachiko wagged his tail once. He expected to see someone behind her. He looked past her shoulder, searching. But there was no one. Mrs. Ueno put a bowl of food on the ground, but Hachiko did not eat. He sat down. He stared at the gate. Mrs. Ueno sighed. She understood his pain, but she could not explain anything. Not to a dog. Hours passed. The sun rose higher. The streets became busy. Shops opened. Voices filled the air. Still, Hachiko sat in the same place. Still, he watched the gate. Finally, he stood up. His legs felt weak, but his heart guided him. He walked slowly to the gate, jumped over it, and followed the same road he always followed. Step by step, corner by corner. He walked toward Shibuya Station. People saw him and whispered, "There is the professor's dog. He is going to the station again." At the station, Hachiko sat in his usual spot. The same corner. The same place from yesterday. The same place from every morning. The station door opened. People came out. Students, workers, shop owners. Hachiko watched every face carefully. He looked for eyes he knew. He looked for the man he loved. But the professor did not come. A ticket officer saw the dog and shook his head. "Poor Hachiko," he murmured. "He still waits." A woman put a small piece of bread near Hachiko. A man placed a cup of water beside him. Some children touched his fur gently, but Hachiko did not move. He did not eat. He did not drink. He only waited. When the sky turned dark, the cold grew stronger. People went home, shops closed. Lights inside the station became dim. Hachiko stayed. After the last train arrived, after the last passenger left. Hachiko stood up slowly. He turned back toward the street. He walked home in silence. Mrs. Ueno saw him enter the yard. She stepped toward him, her eyes full of sadness. "Hachiko," she whispered. "He is not coming back." Hachiko lowered his head. He did not understand the words, but he felt the emotion. He felt the emptiness in the yard. That night, he lay on the ground outside. The wind touched his fur. The cold entered his bones, but he did not move. He waited. Days passed, then weeks, and still. Hachiko walked to Shibuya Station every evening. People at the station began to notice the pattern. He comes at the same time. He sits in the same place. He waits for someone who will never return. Some people tried to call him. "Hachiko, come here!" But he did not leave his spot. Some people offered him food. Some gave him water. Some touched his head gently. Others were not kind. A man from a food stall shouted at him, "Go away! Don't sit here!" A few boys threw small stones. They laughed when Hachiko moved back. But still, Hachiko returned every day, every evening, at the same time. His eyes stayed fixed on the door. He hoped. He believed. He waited. The evenings grew colder. Winter came. Snow fell on Hachiko's fur. But he stayed in place. One old man shook his head and said, "That dog has a loyal heart." Another replied, "He will wait forever." And Hachiko did. He waited because he loved. He waited because he remembered. He waited because he could not understand a world without his master. And day by day, night by night, Hachiko continued the lonely journey of a dog with a faithful heart. Chapter 7. The Dog. Everyone knows. The months passed slowly in Tokyo. Winter turned into spring. Trees near Shibuya Station grew soft pink flowers. People walked with lighter clothes. Children laughed in the streets. But one thing never changed. Hachiko still came to the station every evening, every day, at almost the same time. The same quiet dog walked through the busy street and sat in the same place near the station door. People began to wait for him. "There he is," a woman said softly. "He comes like a clock." "He is the loyal dog," another man said. "The professor's dog." Some days, Hachiko arrived early. He sat calmly. He watched the trains come and go. He looked at each face, hoping to see the one face he loved most, but the professor never appeared. Still, Hachiko stayed. One afternoon, a man walked through Shibuya Station. He had a notebook in his hand and glasses on his nose. He looked like a teacher or a writer. His name was Mr. Saito. He stopped when he saw Hachiko. "This must be the dog I heard about," he whispered, "the one who waits every day." He walked closer. Hachiko lifted his head, but stayed silent. Mr. Saito bent down and touched the dog's fur gently. Hachiko did not move. His eyes stayed on the station door. "He is really waiting," Mr. Saito said. "He is waiting with all his heart." Mr. Saito asked people nearby, "Whose dog is this? Why does he come here every day?" "How long has he been waiting?" The workers at the station answered him. He belonged to Professor Ueno from the university. The professor died last year, but the dog still waits for him. Every evening, same time. Mr. Saito felt something heavy in his chest, a mix of sadness and respect. "This story must be told," he said. "People must know about this dog." He sat on a bench. He opened his notebook. He wrote and wrote, words about loyalty, words about love, words about a dog who did not forget. 3 weeks later, something unexpected happened. A large newspaper called Asahi Shimbun printed a story with a photo. The title said, "Japan's Most Faithful Dog." People across Japan read the story. Families talked about it at breakfast. Shop owners discussed it with customers. Children asked their parents, "Who is Hachiko? Where is he? Can we see him?" And so, Shibuya Station became a place of visitors. People came just to see the loyal dog. Some brought food, some brought water, some brought flowers. Everyone wanted to meet Hachiko. They stood near him, quietly, with respect. "Hachiko," an old woman whispered, "you have a true heart." A young man bowed and said, "I will never forget this story." Children patted his head gently, and Hachiko's tail moved just a little. He still looked at the station door. He still waited. He did not care about the attention. He did not understand the fame. He only knew one thing. My master used to come through that door. And so he stayed in the same place. After the newspaper story, life became easier for Hachiko. People protected him. If a man shouted, someone said, "Stop, this dog is special." If boys tried to throw stones, someone blocked them. This is Hachiko. Respect him. The workers at the station often left a bowl of water near his spot. Some restaurants gave him small pieces of meat or warm rice. People from different cities came to see him. They took photos. They told others the story. And every evening, when the sky turned orange, when people rushed home from work, when trains opened their doors, Hachiko stood up. He watched the faces one by one. He looked deep into the crowd. Hope stayed in his eyes. Love stayed in his heart. Memory stayed in his soul. But the professor did not come. Still, Hachiko returned the next day, and the next, and the next, because loyalty was his nature. Because love did not end for him. Because waiting was his way to stay close to the man he would never forget. Chapter 8. 9 Years of Loyalty. Years passed in Tokyo. Seasons changed again and again. Spring brought soft pink flowers. Summer brought warm nights and busy streets. Autumn brought golden leaves that fell gently on the ground. Winter brought cold winds and white snow. But through all these seasons, through all these years, one thing never changed. Hachiko still came to Shibuya Station. Every morning, he left the yard where he sometimes rested. Every evening, he walked to the same corner near the station door. He sat quietly. He watched the faces. He waited. People who lived near Shibuya began to recognize the pattern. "He is still waiting," a woman said softly. "Even after all these years." "Yes," an old man replied. "His loyalty is stronger than time." The workers at the station knew him well. They saw him almost every day. Some of them brought a small towel to dry his fur when it rained. Others placed water for him in summer. Sometimes a kind shop owner left warm food for him in winter. But Hachiko did not come for food or water. He came because his heart remembered the professor. Every time a train stopped, Hachiko lifted his head. He looked carefully at every man wearing a dark coat, every man with a small work bag, every man who walked with slow steps. But his master never came. Still, Hachiko came back the next day, and the next, and the next. 9 years passed like this. During these years, many people changed. Children grew into adults. Workers retired. New shops opened. Old buildings disappeared. Cars became faster. Trains became louder. But Hachiko stayed exactly the same. The same spot. The same time. The same loyal heart. People from far places came to see him. "Is that really Hachiko?" a visitor asked. "Yes," someone replied. "He has waited for 9 years." They took pictures of him. They touched his head softly. Some stood quietly near him, as if they were standing beside a hero. A teacher brought a group of students. She pointed at Hachiko and said, "This dog teaches us something important. He shows us loyalty. He shows us love. He shows us how strong the heart can be." The students listened silently. They watched the old dog breathe slowly. They saw the hope in his eyes. Even after 9 years, Hachiko still hoped. The seasons continued to move. Some winters were very cold. Snow covered the streets. People hurried home with warm coats. But Hachiko sat in his place. Snow fell on his back. His fur became white with cold. Still, he did not leave. Some summers were very hot. The sun burned the ground. People wiped sweat from their faces. But Hachiko sat under the shade of a small roof near the station. He waited for the trains. He waited for the man who never returned. His body grew older. His steps became slower. Sometimes he limped a little. His eyes became tired. But his spirit stayed strong. His memory stayed alive. Every day, he repeated the same journey. Walk through the familiar streets. Sit in the same quiet corner. Watch the same station door. Wait and hope. 9 years. More than 3,000 days. More than 3,000 evenings. Most dogs forget. Most dogs move on. Most dogs find a new life. But Hachiko was not like most dogs. He was different. He was faithful. He was loyal. He was patient. He waited not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because love does not disappear. Because memory does not fade. Because some hearts never stop hoping. One evening, as the sky turned orange, a young boy stood beside Hachiko. He watched the dog staring at the station door. "Why does he still wait?" the boy asked. His father placed a hand on his shoulder. "Because some promises stay forever," he said, "and some love never ends." Hachiko listened to the voices around him, but his eyes stayed fixed on the door. Another train arrived. People walked out. Hachiko stood up slowly. He watched each face. But once again, the professor did not come. Still, Hachiko did not give up. He would return tomorrow. He would sit again. He would wait again. Because 9 years of loyalty could never change the heart of Japan's most faithful dog. Chapter 9. A Goodbye and a Memory Forever. The winter of 1935 was cold in Tokyo. The wind moved through the narrow streets. Trees shook softly. People walked fast with heavy coats. Snow touched the roofs of Shibuya Station. But even in the coldest days, Hachiko still came to his place. He walked slowly now. His legs were tired. His breath was short. His fur had lost some of its shine, but his heart stayed the same. Every evening, at almost the same time, he reached the station door. He sat quietly. He watched the people coming out of the train. He hoped to see one face, a face he never forgot. People recognized him immediately. "There he is," a man said softly. "Hachiko, the loyal dog." "He is older now," a woman whispered. "Yes," another replied, "but he still comes, every day." Some people brought warm food for him. Some gave him a scarf or a cloth to lie on. Children touched his head gently. Old men bowed to him with respect. Hachiko accepted their kindness, but his eyes always returned to the station door. That door was the center of his world, the place of hope, the place of memory. One cold morning in March, Hachiko did not walk to the yard where he sometimes rested. He did not stand up quickly. He did not move toward Shibuya Station with his usual slow steps. He felt tired, very tired, still. His heart pulled him toward the station. Step by step, slow and careful. He walked through the streets he knew so well. People watched him with sadness. "Hachiko looks weak today," someone said. "He is old," another replied. "He has been waiting for almost 10 years. When Hachiko reached the station, he lay down in his usual corner. He closed his eyes for a moment, and the world around him became soft and quiet. The trains came and went. People walked past him. But Hachiko did not stand up this time. A station worker knelt beside him. "Are you okay, Hachiko?" he whispered. The loyal dog opened his eyes slowly. He looked at the man, then looked toward the station door. One last time. His breathing softened, his body relaxed. His eyes grew calm, and then, quietly, gently, Hachiko's long journey came to an end. He passed away in the street near Shibuya Station. Close to the place he loved. Close to the door he watched for 9 long years. When the news spread, Tokyo felt a deep sadness. People cried. People brought flowers. People visited the spot where Hachiko lay. "He waited until the very end," someone said. "He never gave up," another whispered. Workers from the station stood together in silence. They remembered the dog who greeted them every day. They remembered his calm eyes, his quiet hope, his gentle heart. Children drew pictures of him. Families spoke about him at dinner. Teachers told his story in classrooms. Across Japan, Hachiko became a symbol of loyalty, a symbol of love, a symbol of a heart that never forgets. Months later, a group of artists and workers came to Shibuya Station. They brought metal tools and pieces of stone. They worked for days and nights. People watched with curiosity. Finally, a statue appeared. A statue of a dog. A statue of Hachiko. It stood right in front of the station door, where he always waited. People bowed to it. People touched it gently. People took photos beside it. One man said softly, "Now he can wait forever." Another whispered, "And he will never be alone again." Years later, a second statue was made. This one showed Hachiko standing with his beloved master, Professor Ueno, together again, after so many years apart. These statues still stand today. People meet there. Friends take photos there. Tourists from all over the world visit. They read his story. They feel his loyalty. Even after so much time has passed. Hachiko's life was simple. He was just a dog. He did not speak. He did not write. He did not travel far. But his loyalty touched millions of hearts. He showed the world that love can be strong, that memory can be deep, that waiting can be an act of courage. Today, whenever someone walks near Shibuya Station, they can see the statue. They can think of the dog who waited for 9 long years. A dog with a faithful heart. A dog named Hachiko, whose memory will last forever.